Sweet. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Narik Chase channel. I'm your boy Narik Chase, and in this video, we are doing episode 92 of the Streamline Podcast. I'm very proud. Made it up to episode 92. Got 8 more episodes before I get to 100. Trying to figure out if I'm going to do something awesome with that. But hey, it is what it is. I'm wearing my Sherpa right now, which is kind of like a robe, but it's backwards. It covers your front and not your back. It's cold out here. I'm sorry. Anyways, it covers your front and not your back. It's cold. Okay, cool. So, anyways, yes, I wanted to go ahead and have the discussion. I wanted to do this when the movie came out, but got caught up doing other things. But I was talking to a couple of my friends, and we had these debates and arguments about Spider-Man No Way Home, things that worked, things that didn't work. Now, Spider-Man No Way Home came out last year, and it focuses on the aftermath of the events of Spider-Man Far From Home, in which Mysterio told the world that Spider-Man was Peter Parker, and Peter Parker basically killed him. So now the whole world knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Lord have mercy, I'm always yawning. But anyways, so now Spider-Man goes, Peter Parker ends up going to talk to Doctor Strange about pretty much erasing everybody's memories of him being Spider-Man so that he can live a normal life. And there's other things that go into it, including like his Aunt May, his friends. But when Doctor Strange ends up performing the spell, he's ended up messing up on the spell, and it fractures the universe, and now we got the multiverse. So now they have to deal with that. Now, before we continue on with this video, guys, be sure to hit that share, subscribe, and that notification button to get the best of what we got going on this channel. Now, let's go ahead and continue on with the video. Now, for those who now, when the movie dropped and I gave my initial review of it, I rank my movies in 2 categories. 1, is it an entertaining movie? And 2, is it a good movie? Spider-Man No Way Home is not a good movie from a writing standpoint. It's an entertaining movie. I was very entertained with it. There were some really cool moments in it. It has some really cool action scenes. There was some decent humor, but I found it more entertaining than actually writing-wise a good movie. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's weird how I'm sitting here constantly yawning in front of the damn camera, but then again, I didn't get that much sleep, and I woke up pretty early. But anyways, I found it to be a pretty entertaining flick. Now, in my initial review, I did give it a 5 out of 5. Do I still stand by that? Again, yes, I do, because it was very entertaining. But if we're looking at the logistics of it, the things that make it click, the acting, the direction, choices made when it came to the writing and stuff like that, it's a pretty bad movie. I feel it's like Avengers Endgame, although it is an entertaining movie and it wrapped up a lot of really cool subplots and stuff like that concerning the story itself as well as the characters. Very entertaining. The big battle at the end, what led up to it, very entertaining, very satisfying ending. But ultimately, the writing is what kills the movie. We just said the writing kills the movie pretty much. But let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I liked Spider-Man No Way Home. I really, really did. But like I said, just the writing itself was pretty bad. Now, there are a lot of good things that this film does have, and a lot of good things that this film has established. The idea of a multiverse, I feel, is pretty cool. But I think that, and yes, this is leading to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Sorry, guys. Jesus Christ. And I've been in front of this computer for like 20 minutes, and I didn't yawn. But yes, because I'm supposed to. I guess I got like low iron or something. It runs in the family, so I hear. So maybe that's the thing. But anyways, there's a lot of good that came out of Spider-Man No Way Home. I guess this will be the good, the bad, and ugly type of video for those who. Now, if you like the movie, I understand. I'm not mad at you on that. Like I said, I do like the movie. It just ultimately there's a lot of problems I have with it. But going to the things that I did really like about it, some of my favorite sequences in the film concerning the relationship that you see between MJ and Peter. I do like that the film focuses on it. I do feel that this film nails it a bit more about the evolution of their relationship and where they how started and how far they've come. And yes, I don't think it was strong enough in the first two films, but but I think it works better because it is the evolution over time about their relationship. So it it feels much smoother in this film. It feels like there's much more of a connection between these two. There's definitely a lot of chemistry between Zendaya and Tom Holland. You can definitely feel it in the film. So I really enjoyed the fact that they focused on the relationship and it did flow a lot better. I liked, man, one of my favorite scenes from the movie actually is when Doc Ock first shows up and him and Peter Parker, him and Spider Man have this really badass fight sequence in the on the highway. And it seems like the best fight sequences Spider Man's had in any of these movies is the Doc Ock fights because the fight he had in Spider Man 2 where he was on top of scaling the building, that fight was absolutely badass. The fight with him on the train, definitely badass. And I am on the point to where I think this fight sequences on the bridge is actually, if not as good as the train fight, probably almost even better because it's so fast paced and it shows how badass Doc Ock is as a character, especially with the arms and how diverse he is. And that's one thing I will say. All of the fight sequences show just how diverse both the characters are. So I did like that aspect of it. Green Goblin's presence in the movie also makes is just really good. It's really done well, and this shows you just how menacing a character that the Green Goblin really is. And I really appreciated that they stuck to that. It's like a good continuation of what we saw in the first film, uh, especially since I think that he was a bit more reserved than that one, but in this one he just leans into it a little bit more. So Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is just freaking awesome, and it's nice to also see some of the I like the fact that, spoiler alert, because at this point, everybody knows, definitely the introduction of um, Andrew Garfield as well as Tobey Maguire, their versions of Peter Parker slash Spider-Man into the MCU definitely was well warranted. It was great. It was awesome. You got to just all of the speculation just came through and it's like, yes, definitely they had some really good moments. They had really moving moments. I like the action sequence at the end, although I have my problems with it, but it was just nice seeing these characters interact with each other, seeing these characters have their special, unique talents, their different points of view, how the other films and the events in those films shape themselves and help to shape ultimately Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So it's just great seeing those like moments like that. There's a really cool fight that's kind of like in this apartment building. I thought that was actually pretty cool. Some of the designs I thought were really good as well, especially kind of the updated design of Doc Ock. He looks really cool. Kind of what they did with Green Goblin, kind of. Um, I liked that Doctor Strange was in the film, and I liked that what happens ultimately is pretty much not really his fault because Doctor Strange is a pretty badass character from what I've seen in the movies. I like them more in the movies than I like them in the comics and in the animated stuff. I feel like he's just fucking lame in those. But in the movie, he actually does some pretty cool stuff. The fact that it's this multiverse thing he has to deal with with Peter Parker. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Y'all just got to get used to it. I'm sorry. I can't stop it. I think it's actually pretty cool. I think it's actually pretty cool. Um, and kind of like there's this kind of back and forth. I don't want to say it's a fight between Doctor Strange and Peter Parker, but okay, that's pretty cool as well. I thought that was actually a pretty cool sequence, and ultimately, the one of the best sequences in the film. And I do feel like Marvel is starting to lean into too much cameo type stuff because there's one was it Shang-Chi? Yeah, like in Shang-Chi, there's a sequence where Abomination is sparring with Doctor Strange's homeboy. Can't remember his name right now. But I was like, what was the point of that scene? What was the point of him being in the movie? Didn't make any sense. But unlike that scene, oh, Wong, the guy's name is Wong. That's right. Unlike that scene in Shang-Chi, Charlie Cox's Daredevil makes a cameo in this film, and it actually feels like it's well warranted. It makes sense for his character to be in the film because he is a lawyer, and Peter lawyers up. So that I think that would have been pretty. I think that's actually pretty cool. What but for the most part, and also another thing I will say too, I like the fact that this film does focus on the villains. I do like having villains have a bit more backstory, have a bit more of their motivations and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people didn't like Jamie Foxx in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I actually liked his character. I enjoy characters like that. I enjoy characters that pretty much come from nothing, have nothing, or losers. They get power and then they just ultimately just go loose with it. It's one of the reasons I like Megamind so much because the cameraman was in that position. He got powers, then he became Titan. I do like characters like that. I do, because when I was in school, I felt like that. And right now, I'm even saying if I ever got superpowers, I would just straight up become a straight up villain. Like that would be the fastest turn of somebody into a villain like ever. So I felt like I like characters like that. And Sherpa is on point. It is keeping me. It's probably this damn Sherpa making me because it's so damn comfortable. Uh, but anyway, see, got it, caught it. But anyways, there's a lot that can be said about that. Now, one of the things I can ultimately, I'll keep saying ultimately, but along there's a couple other things that I thought actually worked in the film as well. But there are a lot of things that I did not like about this film, and it made me so freaking mad because the writing had the potential to be so much more and deliver so much more to this film and introduce so much more since they're trying to do this whole multiverse thing. Because I'm like, if this is the multiverse thing, you might as well just lean all the way into it. The whole point of bringing back some of these other characters from the other two franchises is a good idea, but the film went about it in the laziest way possible. I was arguing with, again, my homeboy. And he's like, and I was like, if this is a multiverse, say there's 100 universes, why in the hell, when he breaks the seal, he only gets characters from two of those old universes? Now, my homeboy made the argument that because those were pre established to us as an audience, that we know that there's different universes film wise. So if you go by the Toby Maguire, if you go by the Andrew Garfield, hell, if you add in your old one that came out in the 80s or 90s, those would be like three different universes. But the characters in the MCU don't know that. So why do they only pull from two? It's not like they pull Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire from their universes and one of their villains from each of their universe, and then three or four more from other universes into the film. It was they literally just pulled all of these characters from two, and then the logic behind it didn't really make sense either because it was like everybody that know who Peter Parker is, but I'm like, Okay, Willem Dafoe knew who Peter Parker was, but he died. Uh, Alfred Molina, Doc Ock knew who Peter Parker was as Spider-Man, but then he died. The Lizard knew who Peter Parker was. He didn't die. Sandman ended up finding out who Peter Parker was. He didn't die. Electro never knew who Peter Parker was, and he died. So I'm like, is this? But so that was one of the things. So it's like if they all knew that he was Peter Parker, that Peter Parker Spider-Man, then by that logic, and you breach those two, and I guess those are the closest ones. So why wasn't Mary Jane brought back? Kirsten Dunst, why was her Mary Jane not brought back? And then there's a thing because it felt like there was a time, like they were doing time travel with it as well, because they took William Dafoe, whose character died, I think, 8 years. He died in the like 8 years, I think, to the current timeline. So how did he get brought back? Wouldn't that it be? Would it make more sense for his character to be brought back? Well, wouldn't it make sense for possibly Sandman to be, because he's in the current timeline? I'm assuming that there's a current timeline across the board, and wouldn't it be just Tobey Maguire, Sandman, possibly? That's about it. Maybe the Lizard, because they're still alive. So I don't understand. I still don't understand is that they pulled them. And look, I get it. A lot of the movies that they're doing nowadays is cameos and fan service. It's Spider-Man No Way Home is nothing but fan service. People love the Green Goblin, wanted to see Green Goblin be brought back. People love Doc Ock, want to see Doc Ock be brought back. But honestly, it doesn't really make sense. And then if we're going about a lot, and then they said, all of these characters like died and stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, uh, Electro, if they're going by the logic of people, they said that everybody that knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man got brought in. Why was Electro there? Because Electro shouldn't have been there. And why wasn't Eddie Brock there? And I'm not talking about the Eddie Brock because even with that, okay, Eddie Brock from the Sony movies, why was he there? He was, and then what doesn't make sense is why was he in Cuba? All of the other ones got pulled to the same city. Why was he all the way in Cuba? Why wasn't his character pulled there too? Now, I guess it depends where you are that you get pulled there, because I'm thinking, because I guess they were all in the city, but yeah, I guess they were all in the same city, but just in different universes. Where Eddie Brock wasn't in the city, he happened to be in like Cuba or whatever, in the Caribbean somewhere. So instead of him being pulled into the city, he was pulled into the equivalent of that Caribbean place in that universe. So I'm like, okay, but why wasn't Eddie Brock from Spider-Man 3 there? Why wasn't James Franco character brought back then? If we're going by people who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Hell, why didn't they bring back Gwen Stacy's dad then? Because he ended up finding out. Why wasn't Gwen Stacy brought back? So, like, if we're going by people that knew who Peter Parker was Spider-Man, wouldn't all of those characters get brought back as well? Okay. And if we're going by characters, and if we're going by time, like going through time, because you have to go through time to bring back two characters that died, three characters that died, because it pulled from each movie, which are different time periods. So that means Eddie Brock should have been brought back. Gwen Stacy should have been brought back. Gwen Stacy's dad should have been brought back. Um, oh, why wasn't Eddie Brock, not Eddie Brock, why wasn't, um, not Norman Osborn, his son, the guy James Franco played, Harry Osborn. Why wasn't the Harry Osborn from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 brought back? I would have liked for him to got brought back because we've already had, and that's what I'm saying. Like that's what I'm saying. That's that stuff like that is an issue. I feel like that could have worked out better as in the story if his character got brought back and he would have been the Green Goblin. Yeah, I know a lot of people didn't like it, but fuck that. I think, and that could have been a good bit of closure for his story. But I guess I'm on the fence because I'm like, okay, if it's people that know he's Peter Parker, then it would technically be at the current storyline, and it means people that are alive now should have got pulled into it. Why wasn't his Green Goblin? Because he's still alive. Why wasn't he pulled into it? It would have made more sense if they'd brought him back rather than Willem Dafoe. Now I love Willem Dafoe, and he does a great job as a character, but ultimately it doesn't really make sense for him to have been brought back. So that, and then another thing is when they showed all of these people that knew who Peter Parker is, Spider-Man, I'm thinking to myself, not that many people. If why in the hell do all of these villains or characters or whatever, why the hell do all of these people know he's Spider-Man? It's like saying the same thing happens to Batman. It's like, how many villains actually know that Bruce Wayne is Batman? I don't, even if you do a multiverse thing, I don't believe it's going to be a whole army of people. But so outside of, and then on top of that, one of the biggest disappointments I felt like this movie did was to have Sandman in it, because Sandman wasn't a villain. I mean, I get his motivation in the film for why he's doing what he's doing, but why was he brought back? I would have liked it, like his character should have been Eddie Brock's character. His character should have been the Green Goblin. I can't remember the guy, the one from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Or they could have just took his character out and could have just took that screen time and effort and put into that. His character should have been a character from another dimension, another universe. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I like the movies, but it's like, okay, if we're gonna do that, then if it's people that know that Peter Parker, Spider-Man, if they're going by the regular timeline without time traveling, because you can break the dimensional barrier but not go through time, then it should have been from the Tobey Maguire movie, Tobey Maguire, Sandman, Amazing Spider-Man movie, Andrew Garfield, Lizard. If they have to have these group of villains and stuff, they could have picked 4 villains from four other universes. And I think that would have been pretty cool to have seen that. All of that time that they took out, they could have introduced something new, but they didn't. And it goes back to the nostalgia that I say that it's just nostalgia bait. I don't like that because it ruins. I mean, because think about it, it's called a multiverse. What's the point of saying something's a multiverse when you don't use it? It doesn't make sense. If you go back and watch Into the Spider-Verse, yeah, that's a multiverse. They didn't pull 3 Spider-Man, 3 characters from one universe. They pulled 1 character from each universe. That makes sense. But that's not another issue that that's a rabbit hole. It really is. But one other issue that I had with the film was, and I knew it. I said it when the trailer dropped. I knew it. I knew they was going to freaking do this. They introduced the fact that Mysterio exposed Peter Parker to the world and they did not use that to its fullest potential. You had people, like celebrate him and stuff like that. Cool. You saw some of the ramifications of people knowing who he is. People, treating him like a celebrity at school. The fact he couldn't get to college because of his infamy. How it affected his friends and loved ones. People threatening him and his family and stuff like that, and them having to kind of basically go into protective custody to a certain extent, which is kind of stupid because I'm like, wait a minute, why is Happy doing this? Why isn't like the feds or something doing this? The fact that they brought up legal charges and stuff like that as well, like that was pretty cool. And I would have liked, and I said this before, Charlie Cox being in the film as his lawyer was absolutely fantastic, and I would have liked to see more of the legal ramifications because the film glosses over it. Like I would have liked to see him in court, brought up on charges, and seen the play of the DA trying to get this boy locked up, as well as his aunt and stuff like that, and seeing Charlie Cox do his thing. I would have also liked to see Jennifer Waters being up in this. I actually wanted to see her be the lawyer, but it was nice seeing Daredevil as well because now the Netflix films series is actually canon, even though it's fucking common sense. And Kevin Feige is a dumbass, but like I wanted to see more of that. I would have liked that to have been the movie rather than this bullshit ass multiverse. Now, if they created the multiverse at the end of the film, I would have been okay. I would have been okay with it because then that could have still led into the Doctor Strange too. But I would have loved to have been them dealing with the legal ramifications of him being exposed to the world, what that exposure does mean to people that wear a mask. See, and that could have potentially brought in more, again, Jennifer Waters. I'm glad it did bring Daredevil in, but that also could have introduced another villain that could have capitalized on knowing he's Spider-Man. Aunt May dies in the film, spoiler alert, and that could have been a ramification of them knowing that he's Spider-Man. So I knew they were going to gloss over it. It's like they got back into a corner, and then the whole thing where, you know, Doctor Strange does the spell. Even though him agreeing to doing the spell was actually pretty fucking stupid, and it does make Doctor Strange out to be just very fucking irresponsible. But like I wanted that. That's really what I wanted. And like I said, the whole beginning of them dealing with it, okay. But I knew they were just gonna gloss over it. I knew it was gonna be a fart in the wind. They just weren't going to freaking focus on it because that would have been some actually really good writing. How do you get out of this? So, and honestly, and kind of the whole motivation with his friends and stuff kind of bothered me as well because I like that the film does focus on their friendship, and the friendship is one of the biggest motivating factors of his character in this film. But I don't think it was a strong enough factor for them to have went the direction that they went. I heard another YouTuber end up talk about this, and he said that's for them to cast a spell for everybody in the world to forget that he's Spider-Man just so they could go to college together, because that pretty much was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was really the biggest motivating factor because they wanted to, go to college together. And I'm like, I get it from like a kid's perspective, a teenager's perspective, that would be extremely important. But that's not it's not important enough to cast a spell for everybody in the world to forget something like that. Again, if Aunt May would have gotten killed as a result of it, due to some supervillain you know, trying to get revenge. I get that. It makes sense. That would be, and he did it to protect people's lives. I get that. That makes sense. But the whole college thing, and then it was one college, I think. And so, how many colleges did y'all wait to? I mean, I get that that was y'all like y'all dream and everything, but you know, in the real world, that kind of happens. You can't always get what you want, so it's like you have to deal with it. So it's like, okay, did y'all try doing several other colleges? And maybe if all of the colleges said this, okay, fine, I could get that too. And even there's a moment in the movie where Doctor Strange is in the middle of casting this extremely powerful spell, and Peter does not shut the fuck up, which leads to the spell messing up. But he's like, you didn't even talk to the college to see if you can get, you know, the rejections appealed or something. And he's like, no, I didn't know you could do that. And then that's when he closes the door, and I'm like, you know what? That was just dumb. Really? So his Aunt May didn't tell him that. Happy didn't tell him that. The other two didn't think about it. So my issue, like, I was like, oh my gosh, that bothered me. I didn't like that. That was not. And like I said, in real life, you should get used to that because a lot of people that are talented, that are smart, get rejected from college, despite the fact that they're more than well qualified to be there. So it could have been a hell of a lot better reason. And then another issue I have with the film is the fact that they try to, okay, they're villains, and to some extent, I like the sympathetic card that they're all dealt. Norman Osborn becomes the Green Goblin to try to save his company. I mean, he does it unintentionally, but he ultimately did it because he tried to save his company. Doc Ock becomes the way he is because he's trying to do this experiment. He accidentally kills his wife, and he's trying to. It's one of those moments where a character sees power and he's trying to attain it. Now he does it for different reasons. Like he wants to have renewable energy. Just basically, he's a mad scientist. Okay, I can get behind that. Jamie Foxx, the one I sympathize with the most, is basically a loser in life. He ends up getting power, and as a result of it, becomes a villain because he's felt so abused and stuff. So, okay, I get it. The lizard trying to heal his arm because he lost his arm. He tried to regenerate it. Ultimately, pulls up basically a Jekyll and Hyde. Okay, I like that. Sandman isn't really a bad guy. He's just trying to take care of his daughter and just dealing with the shitty hand that he's dealt. Even though he's doing it the wrong way. Okay, I get that too. So why the fuck is Peter Parker trying to heal them? Sometimes a villain is a villain. It's nice to just have a villain, just be a villain. You know what I mean? I like again, the Green Goblin. I like the fact he's just a straight up asshole. It's like if you could see any equivalent in any of these films of the Joker, the Green Goblin would be it. So I like some villains. I can understand being sympathetic, but I like actually just seeing a villain just be a villain sometimes. And this film does this thing, has this thing where, and this doesn't really make sense that he even had this. Happy is under investigation because apparently this super advanced machine came up missing. Happy has the machine in his home. And I'm like, why? If you're under investigation for stealing this shit, it probably shouldn't be at your house. Now, if you have it in some warehouse or something, some that you bought off the books or something, I get that. But to just have it in your house, it's like, how come the police didn't come, the FBI didn't come and arrest his ass? Well, anyways, this is the part I didn't like because Peter Parker takes the time out to try to fix these guys. Now I do like story wise and character wise, it feeds into their character development. All of these villains basically become good guys again, or at least normal. But this is the issue. Conveniently, he ends up basically finding a cure for all of them. And it's all happens, I don't know, within like in the story of the movie in maybe an hour. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why? Why does he have to have a cure? I don't like that. It fucking sucks. And a lot of it is, if you look at Doc Ock, when Peter finally gets to him in the story, they have a conversation in the middle of a fight, and that's when Doc Ock wakes up. He becomes aware that he's doing all these bad things, and he ultimately sacrifices himself to save everybody, to save the city. And Tom Holland is pretty much undoes that. Now, I want to say this too. I don't care what nobody says. I don't. I'm with a lot of people when it comes to Tom Holland Spider Man. I think he's a good Spider Man, but he utilizes Stark tech way too freaking much, and it takes away from his character. Now, in the middle of the fight between him and Doc Ock on the bridge, he sprouts out the legs, and that was probably the only scene where I was like, I like the fact that he has a Stark tech because it made for a very entertaining fight sequence with Doc Ock. Now, outside of that, mm-mm, outside of that, it was his. It's not. It doesn't feel like Peter Parker. It feels like Tony Stark. It feels like anybody could have been wearing the suit, doing all of this stuff, and not Peter Parker. And you don't want that feeling. In the other two films, it felt like Peter Parker was doing all this stuff, but in this one, it feels like Iron Man. If anybody can get into the suit, you can pretty much be Iron Man, and it feels like the same thing. And then that's ultimate. That's how he ends up. I need to stop saying ultimately. That's how he ends up beating Doc Ock. Excuse me. It's pretty much because of the Stark tech, and I'm like, and it's so silly how he does it. It pissed me off. I actually did not like that. I would have liked it. I thought in the trailer you see Doc Ock tear a piece of Peter's outfit off, the nanite, part of his costume off, and the nanites fuse with his arms. I'm like, okay, cool. Now we get a souped up Doc Ock. Awesome. You get Doc Ock's technology mixed with that of Tony Stark, that's going to be freaking awesome. He's going to be just a badass. And that doesn't happen. Peter ends up hacking the nanites to take control of Doc Ock's suit. And I'm like, and then he actually utilizes that to restrain Doc Ock. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? That's so stupid. That's so lazy. And I'm like, okay, I would have been more glad to see him utilize his tentacles to absorb the nanites from Peter's suit, souping up his own tentacles, and then Peter has to deal with no costume, but him having to deal with the souped up Doc Ock with without start tech. So basically, him having the suit backfired, and now Doc Ock has the power to use the suit. Absorbs the nanites into his arms and stuff. So Peter has to deal with him like his regular Spider-Man suit, which he dons at the end of the movie. And I'm like, wow, they did that to Doc Ock. Again, the whole bridge sequence is just freaking awesome. One of the best sequences in Spider-Man cinema It's it's awesome, but they just dropped the ball with some of the humor that they put in. Ned's character, for what now? Ned is one of those characters like I fucking hate Ned. I wish his character would have took the glider instead of Aunt May, because he is such a freaking annoying character. And what he does in the film, what he brings to the film, is questionable. It's very questionable, especially since a lot of stuff that's going on seems very convenient. And like I said, I like the movie's entertaining, but there's a lot of conveniences in this film. Things happen because they just happen with no explanation. Ned ends up developing ability to utilize magic to a certain extent. And you're like, so he never showed that ineptitude in any other film. It was never brought up. And because he does it, it ends up saving helping the crew out conveniently when they needed it. Um, and also it was actually utilized to bring out Peter Parker with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. Now, if Doctor Strange would have did it looking for Peter Parker and they popped up, I'd be like, cool. That would have been a lot better. But just I don't like Ned. I've never liked Ned. A lot of people don't like Ned. Ned is that annoying friend that should have died in the horror movie because he kept doing and saying the stupid stuff, but he doesn't. And somehow he survives. Hell, a lot of times the main character sacrifice himself for this character. You're like, why this character just don't die? I don't like Ned. I never liked Ned. He's always just been just a stupid character. What he brings to this film emotionally wise, especially the relationship that's really pronounced in this film between the three. I liked it. I would say I do like that, but also I still don't like his character. But there is a lot to unpack with that. Um, and I wish I could have brought Ken with me in on it, or potentially Zach or Kenner, because I think it would have been a really good back and forth. But like, I'm there's still so much to delve into. What led up to Aunt May's death? What was the point of having Happy and Aunt May break up if Happy was still going to be in a movie to support them anyway? Like, that was pretty stupid. Why the forgetting spell? And why was it Peter Parker that messed up the spell? Why couldn't, like, and this is way I think should have been okay. When Doctor Strange is doing his spell, everybody in the world forget spell. Peter won't shut the fuck up, despite the fact that Doctor Strange is telling him to shut the fuck up. Then he's like, well, okay, I don't want Aunt May to forget. I'm like, shouldn't that have been something you said before he did the spell? Because he keeps adding people, messing up the spell even more. And I'm like, why does Peter Parker do that? Why wasn't it? Why? Because it shows you that Peter Parker is a fucking idiot, and it shows Doctor Strange is a fucking idiot. Wouldn't it make more sense for? Okay, everybody knows Peter Parker Spider-Man. One villain follows Peter Parker to the Sanctum Sanctorium, gets the drop on them in the middle of the spell, and that what messes up the spell. You could have introduced the new villain, and you could have made a more capable way of the spell being a more probable way of the spell messing up. Like I said, it's still an entertaining film. Has some really, really good moments. I cried when Andrew Garfield popped up. I cried when Tobey Maguire showed up. I cried during the end sequence when they had the very good conversation of, you know, everybody, you know, Tobey Maguire watching Uncle Ben die, Andrew Garfield watching Gwen Stacy die as they're trying to console Tom Holland because Aunt May died. I cried during those sequences. I really enjoyed seeing these three characters, their dynamic, them working together, them speaking together, seeing it like ultimately that's what you go to see No Way Home for, is that dynamic, those scenes, because they, next to that fight scene with Doc Ock and a handful of other ones, they are absolutely perfect with those sequences. They are so meaningful. They literally are the meat and potatoes of this film. All of that speculation, all that denying, all that lying, just was, it was worth it. It was worth it. That's one of those moments that I've seen happen where it's like it makes comic book history. Just like the moment when the Avengers first got together, great. Endgame, the moment where you see all of the heroes as an army fighting all of Thanos' forces. The moment in Justice League, the Snyder Cut, when you finally see the Justice League standing together. The moment when Wonder Woman showed up in the fight, and you had this moment where Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman together. So like there are a lot of really, really great moments like that, and having these characters interact with each other was just one of them. It was just fantastic. But like I said, there's a lot that they could have done better. Again, if this is the multiverse, and I would have argued to make the movie better, they should have taken out. If we're gonna go by franchise wise, they could have kept Sandman. No, not Sandman. If they were gonna bring back some characters, okay, fine. They could have brought back Green Goblin, I guess. Doc Ock, okay. Electro, okay. I guess Lizard, okay. But then they could have brought two more villains from other universes, and that could have been a potential Sinister Six movie. Because they brought Eddie Brock, Venom in, even though he didn't interact with them. So what was the point of that? And again, he didn't know Peter Parker was Spider-Man. So what was the point of him being brought over? But introduce two new villains from other universes. That would have been cool. I would have liked for them to brought Gwen Stacy's, the Gwen Spider Gwen. I would have liked to have brought her character in. That could have introduced another Spider-Man and potentially another franchise. But then again, Sony had the Spider-Man rights. But I still would have liked them to have brought Gwen Stacy. It actually had now I don't want Emma Stone. If Emma Stone's character would have stayed alive, that would have been like cool. But it'd have been nice to see. It would have been nice to see somebody else play the character, and I would have been cool with that. I would have been really, really cool with that. That would have been a good introduction of a character, because Spider-Man Gwen was one of the best characters into the Spider-Verse, and I'm hoping that her character returns for the sequel. But you know, those are the good, the bad, and the ugly of Spider-Man and No Way Home. And I just want you guys in the comment section below, let me know, what are your thoughts? What were some of your favorite moments? What were some of the moments that you didn't like so much? What were some of the things they could have done better? Because honestly, they could have did a lot better with this film. I would have liked for them to have done the whole legal aspect of it, and then maybe did like a two offer. Have this movie be like the Infinity War, and then the next movie be like the Endgame. We'll have this movie introduce the villains and Spider-Man having to deal with them, and then the next movie have the three Spider-Man teaming up to deal with these villains while Doctor Strange just deal with the multiverse and everything. Like, I think if this movie was 4 hours and they split it two and two, like I said, the first half them deal with the legal ramifications, and the villains being brought up while him meeting Spider-Man being introduced at the end of the film, and then the next film being them together dealing with the villains and trying to stop the multiverse and all of that, whatever, from happening. I think that would have been a better way to, one, establish more better villains, other villains, and two, giving us a lot more screen time. It's potentially introducing another Spider-Man character, which I would say Spider Gwen, and I'm quite sure a lot of people would agree with me as well, of having her there. But then again, she's not dead, and I guess she would know Peter Parker is Spider Man. If in her universe Peter Parker was ever Spider Man, she might be the only Spider Man in that universe. I don't know. I don't know. But yes, in the comment section below, give me your thoughts about the video. Did you like No Way Home? Did you not like No Way Home? Things that you did like, things that you didn't like, things that could have been better. And do you think that they should continue on with another potential crossover with the three Spider-Man? Because I thought Tom Holland was only going to do 3 films, but just the MCU, so they're going to drag him as long as that they can with his character because he's so popular. He is a good Spider-Man. If they stop with Tony Stark stuff so much, look, I like Tony Stark, but the man's dead. Leave him dead. Leave him dead. But be sure to hit that like, share, subscribe, and a notification button to get the best of what we got going on. And we'll definitely see you guys next weekend.